maybe we can start this this meeting with the issuers page that's on the on GitHub, and I wanted to go through a few of these suggestions in there. In specific, maybe 2 of them. And Publius, maybe you can help answering some of these. Starting off with the soil issuance improvement. Can you maybe quickly take us through what is this proposal and what will it do?
So this proposal changes the weather in a given season during the first 5 minutes. So currently, the way weather is structured in Beanstalk is that the weather is constant throughout the entire season, and that weather moves up and down 3%, up to 3% every season. This has proven to be, kind of inefficient in terms of how quickly it's capable of repricing the weather. Specifically, actually, maybe it's better we have Breen come up and speak about it because he's the one who proposed it. Can we get Breen on stage here?
Yes, let's do that.
GM.
Hi, Breen.
Hello.
GM, sir, how are you?
Doing good. Let me pull up the issuance right now.
Yeah, I'm going to drop it as well in the town hall chat. All right, sir, a lot of talk there. Take us through the logic behind it.
Yeah, so like Poop says, given a season, we can only increase and decrease the weather or temperature, by 2%. And, we do this because we want to do, short-term changes. I mean, not so long-term changes for the temperature so that, we don't rapidly change, right? But, there are times when soil supply exceeds the demand, or the opposite, the demand exceeds the supply, right? And we will accurately, take that into account. So basically what this does is we do a duct auction where the temperature of the soil that we sown, ramps up over time during the first 25 blocks or so, which is around 5 minutes. So if you sow in, the same block as the sunrise, then you'll get a very minimal amount of soil. And then over time, it ramps up to the, right now it's the temperature, but we'll change it to the max temperature after 25 blocks, right? And now this gives us the ability to better accurately measure the demand, right? So if people sown earlier in the season, that means people are willing to take less of a return for sowing, right? So we just use a logarithm function going from 0 to the maximum temperature.
All right, I dropped in maybe a summary of that, and let me know if I'm reading this correctly. So at time 0, the temperature starts at 1, and then from 0 to 25 blocks, which is approximately 5 minutes, it will ramp up to the temperature in a logarithmic function, and then it continues at the temperature after 25 blocks. Is that correct, Breen?
Yeah.
Can you maybe tell us why a logarithmic function and not just like a linear function? Why is the ramp up logarithmic? Okay,
so initially we're discussing, whether we could do a linear function, or any other, function would be, suitable for this. And the reason why we chose a logarithmic is because we like to quickly ramp up towards the max temperature, and then we'll have a longer period of time in which, you have a greater period of time in which you can sow between toward the upper bound, right? So for example, if you wanted to sow, let's say 75% of the max weather or temperature, in the linear implementation, you only have, 1 block or so to do that, right? And because blocks are in 15-second or 12-second increments, there's a big jump between, each block. With a logarithmic function, you have a bigger time window in which you can sow and still get, within the range of what you really want. So does that kind of make sense?
Makes sense to me. And then lastly, the last thing to note here is that right now, the way the model measures if demand is increasing or not is that it looks at the first 5 minutes and it sees if soil is sold out or not. this is going to change now, just given that the auction is going to happen in the first 5 minutes. So it's going to look at the 10 minutes, or from 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Bean, for summarizing this. And anyone, if you have questions about that, feel free to drop them.
Awesome.
All right, Publius, the second one I wanted to discuss is, which I think got posted a few hours ago, that's the combined token support. Can you maybe also summarize to us what is the thinking behind this, and why do we need something like that?
So the combined token support is being implemented, is being worked on by Root. Don't know if Manifold wants to talk at all about it. Manifold, do you want to talk about kind of BIP 24?
Sure. Yeah, happy to speak at a high level, and Mod, if I go into any more technical details, I'm also happy to have a Root dev on this call for next week. But the combined token support, effectively, allows us to, begin, thinking about the creation of a fungible deposited bean, which for Root is pretty important. And the reason being, one of our core theses here is that by not having to forfeit the positive carry of the silo, participants in liquidity will still be attracted to Beanstalk denominated order books, and specific for the Root betting exchange. And so by having a fungible deposited bean, which combined token support effectively allows rolling deposits into the current season, this effectively allows us to leverage the silo's positive carry outside of the Beanstalk protocol, which currently you can't export beans, or beans aren't composable within DeFi when you also want to have the yield bearing function of beans. And Publius, I'm not sure if Mod wants to go in any more of the technical details, or if you want to save that for next week. Probably best to let our lead dev discuss that.
I think this was clear, and just to make sure we understood this correctly. So more or less, what's happening here is that you're allowing someone else to be able to transfer the deposits instead of the owner, or just the owner. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's my understanding. It can be farmed by anyone.
All right. Thank you, Manifold. While we have you here, can you maybe also just give us a top line update on Root and what's happening with Root?
Totally. So first things first. Root has been in the fortunate position to add several incredibly talented individuals to our team. I see Icarus here in the audience, who's one of those individuals, and we're incredibly excited to have him on board. It shows, and I think Publius refers to it as a Beanstalk brain trust, but it continues to grow, and I think that's really a leading indicator of a lot of exciting developments that are going to be happening in the ecosystem. And specific to Root, we are at a place where the V1 design has been iterated multiple times, and we're excited as we believe there's numerous advantages on just the V1 on the betting exchange versus traditional Web 2 apps where people can place bets, or Vegas. There's the design clearly has increased capital efficiency. We believe it's going to have much cheaper spreads than Vegas, and cheaper prices, in my opinion, is a big deal. There's increased liquidity on positions versus current options for people to make bets on, and all of these things again I think are bode really well, and we're quite excited as we start to build this V1. From my vantage point personally, obviously all of us, believe in the thesis of Beanstalk, and again, having, a positive carry order book, which enables, liquidity to stay parked and make markets on top of the order book. But also, I think it's really important to, as a standalone product, to be able to have real edges versus current solutions, being denominated value or not. And I think Root's betting exchange and its order book is getting to, a place where, I personally feel that, it's going to be really, really competitive and drive organic demand to Beanstalk. So that's kind of like the high level overview right now.
Thank you, Manifold. And we have a question from Chad, and I believe that's regarding the soil issuance improvement. And he asks, how would that impact demand for calling the sunrise? Publius, any comments there?
Think they're completely unrelated in the fact that, the sunrise reward as of now is going to stay the same. There's still going to be a base 100 beans that increases slowly to about 2,000 over 5 minutes. However, we have noticed some kind of inefficiencies in potentially paying, too many beans when gas fees are low. So, kind of revamping the incentive on the sunrise function is something that, is likely to come sometime in the future.
Great. All right, let's take a round across the contributors, and maybe I can start with some marketing updates. So we've had the community grant program now for close to a month, and there are 5 entrants so far, which the rewards, let's say, or the awards will come out in the next few days. There have been also some talks with other contributors who wanted to make use of the community grant. One of them is ASFI. So ASFI is looking to make some sort of a course for Beanstalk. That'll be called the Bean Scholars program. And the idea is for it to run for like 12 weeks. It'll be like an independent one, so Beanstalk Farms won't be like producing this. So it will be like a separate, let's say, independent Beanstalk course. And we look forward to that. And there will be more information coming out, hopefully from ASFI soon. Otherwise, the audio team, and that's Bella Beantalk and Beenthoven, they want to give a try to a new podcast for Beanstalk. And the idea of that podcast is going to be some sort of a limited series. So it's going to be like one season. We've approved a pilot program for that. So we'll also look forward to that. Otherwise, anyone else, we encourage you as well to make use of the community grant. So any ideas that you have, anything of that sort, come over and let's discuss it. Besides that, we've had small things to mention, and that's the Klima Infinity thing that they announced, and then DeFi Llama as well fixed the Beanstalk, let's say, numbers on. And I've also had a chat with Chai Kitty, who was the winner of the poker tournament, or the last poker tournament that we had. And hopefully we're looking to maybe have another one sometime next month. Okay. Silent Chad, maybe we can move to you and give us some UI updates.
Certainly, yeah. Thanks, Maud. So a lot of stuff going on this week. We've shipped a couple small updates, fixing some bugs and shipping some other styling updates that you'll see in the updates channel. Most notably right now, the thing that we're working on in the short term is shipping the APYs. More or less everything is ready to go here, and so expect to see that on the site, if not later today, then in the next couple of days. And if you're curious about how those APYs are going to get calculated, it's similar to how we calculated them previously, but this time using a different form of averaging. So I'm going to drop a link to the documentation about this, which will go public along with that launch in the next couple of days. So stay tuned on that front. Beyond that, so a couple other important things. We've actually had another engineer join the front end team. Bean Sama. We'll have Bean Sama come join us up here next week to talk a bit about what they're working as well. But they're going to hop in and help us tackle basically all of the front end stuff that's coming up over the next couple months, of which there's a lot. Right now on the front end side, so besides some of these smaller tweaks that we've described, really focused on the DEX and Pod Marketplace V2, both of which are pretty unique design and engineering problems in their own right. So on the DEX front, there's a couple things going on in parallel. Red Beans is working on a lot of new designs and sort of tweaks to that, which you can speak more to. On the engineering front, so we'll be making some updates to the silo page for each asset to reflect that some assets are now going to also be, some whitelisted assets will be basically Beanstalk wells. So we'll keep you posted on that. And then also working on updating the market to take into account the fact that now we're going to have more than just the pod market. It will also be, ERC20 token market, if you will, which is Beanstalk wells as well as other markets. So a lot of work going on that front. And yeah, beyond that, just continuing to grow the team. Forward thinking on my mind in particular are things like the SDK, which we plan to get started on in the coming weeks to months, about basically focused on building good tooling around Beanstalk. We've been, obviously with Root and a lot of other projects are starting to building on Beanstalk. We want to try to open up some of the tooling that we've used on the UI to other developers to help them, use Beans in their applications. So a lot of work to be done there, but something to kind of look forward to.
Thank you, Chad. With regards to the market and the AMM, do you have an idea on how will that be on the UI? Will everything fall under the same tab? Will it have like a separate front end? What are the thoughts there?
Yeah, great question. So for right now, the plan is to have everything accessible through the Beanstalk UI. There's kind of a couple fronts in which you'll be interacting with the Beanstalk DEX. So the first is that when a well is created in the Beanstalk DEX, and the corresponding token is whitelisted, which is what we'll expect for Bean, ETH, and other pools that will be launching on the DEX early on, you would deposit to that pool using more or less the exact same interface that you use right now to deposit to the Bean 3 curve pool. So that part will stay more or less the same. The new piece of UI that you'll find is under the market. There will now be a section that focuses exclusively on Beanstalk wells. And so you'll be able to view all of the available wells, see metrics about those wells, at very, similar in some ways to maybe what you'd see on like the Uniswap or Curve Analytics websites, but that'll be built straight into the UI. So yeah, basically one-stop shop.
Understood. And Pizzaman had a question on the APY calculations, and he found the answer in the APY document. So if anyone has questions on how is the variable APY calculated, you can find it detailed in the link that Chad shared. All right, Sweet Red Beans.
Yeah, I'll be quick because Chad kind of touched on some of my points, but my time this week has mostly been going into the DEX. Kind of getting close to being done with the first run through, but kind of collecting feedback from some of the core team now, and we'll kind of be iterating on that feedback to kind of improve it and get it ready. So not a super long update from me this week, but have spent a bunch of time on the DEX.
Thank you, Sweet Red. Austin, on your end, and I guess one of the things that now we'll want to do is have you write some good documentation on changing the word DEX to an AMM.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. On the operations front, I've been spending some time nudging the bug bounty program forward. Been going back with the Immunify team quite a bit. There's some intricacies to figure out, particularly given that in practice we can only pay out bug bounties in beans, whether the price of bean is $1.10 or 50 cents. So working out some of the details there. The current thinking is to have a future BIP that essentially allows the BCM to mint beans on a case-by-case basis to pay out these bug bounties, rather than doing some sort of upfront, bean mint. Obviously, that would have to be amended with a future transition back to on-chain governance when the time comes. But I think that might make sense. That structure might make sense, in the near term. And otherwise, just been spending some time streamlining and documenting a bunch of internal Beanstalk Farms processes, such that they can mostly be on autopilot, whether that's processing reimbursements from contributors paying for software, publishing those monthly operations reports, and a long tail of other things.
Thank you, Austin. And just to summarize that, the idea is for the BIP to give authority to the BCM to be able to mint basically the bounty for any bugs. That's correct?
Correct. Yeah, up to some total, where after that total, perhaps another BIP would be required at some point in the future. Maybe to just give like kind of a TLDR on the structure, there's a handful of different tiers for all of the severity of each bug report. Call it like medium, high, and critical. And the thinking is that for critical bugs, that result in loss of user funds, things like that, the max bounty would be something like 1.1 million beans. Of course, the idea is that even if that bounty hunter does end up selling, Beanstalk is much better off having that reported and fixed than found by a black hat hacker of sorts. So, if the max bounty is 1.1 million, perhaps it makes sense to propose for the BCM to be able to mint beans up to a couple million. We'll have to do some more thinking on that front, and happy to answer any questions and open to feedback on that front.
Understood. Chad is giving an update on TBEC. TBEC, you're in the audience. If you want to come up and share it, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I can read the update. And that's TBEC is working on a new data playground, which will replace the old Dune dashboard. And we do not have a date for that. All right, Publius, any closing comments?
Yeah, I have a couple things to mention here. First off, kind of on EBIP 1, that is under audit by Halborn right now. We are not rushing to get the chop function back online. The goal is to make sure that it's, as secure and, correctly implemented as possible before adding it back. Secondly, Sync brought to our attention something very specific about, kind of how the merge changes, kind of Ethereum at the protocol layer, which can have a large effect on on-chain oracles. And kind of in summary, the change is, with the merge, kind of upcoming, block proposers are now predetermined in some sense. Whereas before, kind of whatever miner happened to, mine the correct, hash first is the one that got to propose the block. Kind of post-merge, we now have a cycling group of validators, such that you can kind of see which validators are going to be able to propose future blocks. Now, this creates the potential problem where if a single node operator running multiple validators ends up having two validators proposing a block back to back, then they essentially have control over what transactions go or end up going and don't end up going in that block. And what this can lead to is multi-block MEV. And this can have great consequences on on-chain oracles, namely TWAP oracles and this EMA oracle we have been working on. And kind of there's instant implications in regards to how minting happens within Beanstalk. So essentially what this kind of the merge does is allow someone to effectively manipulate the TWAP oracle on the Bean 3 curve pool to mint however many beans they want. Now we have had our heads down kind of thinking about potential solutions that we can implement that require minimal changes to the code to prevent such an attack. And I guess to talk about the magnitude of such an attack, someone executing this attack would not get the beans that are minted. The beans would still be distributed 33%, 33%, 33%. But someone could still manipulate the TWAP oracle to mint, a large amount of beans by essentially, buying the price up, incredibly high and, letting that sit for one block. And even though there are about 300 blocks in an hour, if you push the price up to $1,000 for one block, that's still quite significant when you even averaged over 300 blocks. So kind of the solution that we are kind of come to that we will likely look to and see if it makes sense to implement in an EBIP is adding some sort of supply mint cap. Now, this mint cap would likely be something like 0.1 to 1% of total supply, pending some calculations on the potential cost and fees to, conduct this TWAP Oracle manipulation. But kind of why we feel like a, mint cap is a good way to, prevent this problem is that, number one, it minimizes drastically the potential impact of such a TWAP manipulation, and two, it's incredibly easy to implement from a code perspective. We feel confident that we'd be able to basically implement the solution and get it audited and implement it through an emergency BIP if the community feels like that is the correct path to go down by the time the merge occurs. Which even though this attack is not one such that an actor can financially benefit from, and it requires, and it relies on kind of randomness to allow someone to have multiple validators positioned, sequentially in the proposition order. We still feel like it makes sense to kind of combat this problem now. What this means for, future oracles, we've been putting our heads together and come up with a few ways that we can actually kind of prevent this sort of attack on TWAP oracles and EMA or any kind of on-chain oracle by kind of, putting some limit on the amount that a balance is able to change each block. And we don't quite have the details written down, and are happy to share once we do. But feel confident that we are still going to be able to move forward with using on-chain oracles and liquidity wells. But it's likely just going to require a bit more development work and thought to really make sure that we combat against this attack. Going forward in regards to the Bean3 curve pool, we should look to move off the pool as quickly as possible, as the potential attack on the TWAP is going to be present for as long as we use the pool, given that we cannot upgrade the Bean3 curve pool at the at the pool layer to change the TWAP mechanism to make it resistant to such attacks. And thus, once the liquidity wells are released, we should collectively try to move the Bean3 curve LP over to a liquidity well with, oracles resistant to this type of attack as soon as possible. Curious if anyone has any thoughts, questions, concerns on this, but that's it on our end. Publius, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to this.
Well, first off, shout out to Sync for, as always, having his head in the sand. In the sense of Beanstalk is dirt oriented, so always in the weeds and knowing exactly where his attention should be. This is quite the find. And another reminder that this remains uncharted territory, and there's lots of sharks in the water that we constantly collectively need to be looking out for. In terms of short-term risk, it's Beanstalk isn't of the size where it would likely make sense for this to be an attack in the early days post-merge, but nonetheless, the potential for the attack exists, and therefore it probably does make sense to do this as an emergency BIP via the BCM as opposed to a formal normal BIP. But that's something that we'll probably ask Halborn about for their opinion as to the associated risk here as well before a final decision on that front. And the goal is always to have the DAO be the body that is implementing changes to any rules within the Beanstalk contract. But in this case, there does seem to be some potential risk to the integrity of the model, and therefore perhaps it does make sense to implement it as an emergency BIP. Otherwise, as Publius was saying, the implementation of the wells, from our perspective, it was bound to happen anyways, given the nature of constructing a Beanstalk specific oracle. That's something that we've been talking about for a while in order to get the delta B calculations right. But this is just, as Publius was saying, another layer of complexity. So probably pushes the timeline back for the Bean ETH well, which will hopefully be the first well, a little bit further back. But generally, the goal is to get things right and not to rush them. So from our perspective, this is progress in the right direction, and feel pretty good about the future of on-chain oracles, which many people are just switching to Chainlink. We're gonna fight the good fight to avoid that as much as humanly possible.
Thank you, Publius. There was another question on the governance channel where someone suggested if there are any thoughts on, or if there are any considerations for the BCM to pause Beanstalk ahead of the merge, just to be careful, let's say.
That would seem to be an abuse of power, as there doesn't seem, assuming that the oracle is fixed, there don't seem to be any known risks, but perhaps it's better to be prudent. Generally don't think that's in line with the ethos of Beanstalk, which is not necessarily the most risk averse when it comes to things like this. It's very much a risky endeavor, as we were talking about earlier with regards to the discovery of this oracle issue. So not sure the benefits of pausing the protocol, other than there will be a delay in the discovery of how Beanstalk functions post merge. So the hope is that the protocol is and will be secure post merge, and therefore there's probably no reason to pause it.
And I guess would just add in here that if for some reason the community feels differently about this, a community-led discussion, we welcome that. And ultimately, if someone did want to go forward with proposing some sort of snapshot vote as like a measure of kind of how the community feels about potentially pausing, I know numerous other protocols such as Aave are pausing around the merge. And recommend everyone individually does kind of do their own research to see what the potential issues could be and how those would affect Beanstalk, but generally share the same opinion with Publius, that it's something that is kind of an extra safety precaution, and it's hard to see how necessarily Beanstalk would have some sort of issue in the process.
Okay. Warren Porridge, I see your hand is raised, so I can bring you up to stage if you have a question. I've invited you. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. Otherwise, you can always drop your question in Town Hall chat as well. Jams asks, will there be a failsafe to the on-chain oracle as things are getting developed in the initial stages? So maybe use Chainlink as a backup validator?
So, kind of the thing here is, kind of what Beanstalk seeks to, kind of determine over season is the average beans above peg. Kind of from research we've conducted into Chainlink, it seems that, Chainlink really is only able to, in their base default oracle, provide a bean USD price. Now, that gets us part of the way, but delta B is not just a function of price. It is a function of liquidity. So it's really hard to see how, without some kind of, long custom, kind of solution to creating some new custom Chainlink Oracle, which again, it doesn't seem like they're in the business of building. It seems very hard to see, to kind of come up with a way for how we can, move this Delta B Oracle off chain without kind of totally changing the formula altogether. For that reason, we feel confident sticking with on-chain oracles. But again, like if this is something the community is interested in and someone wants to start working with some off-chain oracle provider, it is something we can look into. Other fail safes, that can be used, can be ones that kind of, compare the relative change in values. Was looking into Liquidy's Oracle and saw that basically, they query Chainlink, and if the Chainlink Oracle changes by a significant percentage, based on the last value it read, then they look to Teller and they compare that the two values are about the same. If they're not about the same, they fall back and compare the Teller Oracle to kind of the last price. Overall, think, a lot of thought can go into determining what oracles we should use and how we should implement on-chain fail-safes. But don't think we necessarily need to rely on off-chain oracles to kind of have these fail-safes. Instead, we can build these fail-safes into the liquidity wells that we're already building, and thus, still have, a resilient on-chain, Ethereum native oracle that has built-in fail-safes. And think, everyone in the community should, spend some time really thinking about, what they feel like could potentially go wrong with an oracle and how they would build in, kind of on-chain fail-safes.
Thank you for that answer, Publius. Okay, I think we are at the end of the meeting and there are no more questions. So thank you everyone for joining. And if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them, anytime, reach out to anyone, drop them in the questions channel. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.